Hi, Julene.
Hey, Tracy.
How you doing, girl?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. I got me a cup of coffee. I'm kicking around in my sweats. No makeup
Good.
on. You guys get me El Dante today, man.
It's got to be colder over there where you are than where I'm in, that's for
It's
sure.
beautiful out though. For
Is
the
it?
first time in a long time, the sun is shining. It's milder temps. It's still cold, but it's 41 degrees and sunny.
Wow, good.
Yeah, so when I have sunshiny days, I always want to go sit out on the porch. So this morning I went out and sat on the porch, drank my coffee, listened to the snowbirds. We don't have a lot of birds here right now. They're all flown south for the winter, but um yeah, that's my morning ritual. I can't wait for spring when all the birds come back and the flowers start blooming. And
We're close.
so yeah, I know. Over here where we live, it gets gray and cold and dismal, and a lot of people fall into seasonal depression. And, so when the sun comes out, it's like, yay, I am so ready.
Well, I live in a sunny, hot place, and people get really overwhelmed and depressed when it's too hot for so long too. So,
Yeah, so
you know,
yeah, well, too
that's
much of anything is not good.
exactly.
Needs to be balanced in all areas.
That's right.
Speaking of which, I would like to introduce today's guest is Julene Kerr. Is it
Hello.
pronounced Kerr or Carr?
Kerr. It's
I was
Kerr.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I call you, but I figured, well, I better ask because I know in North Carolina we go to Lake Carr, which is spelled the same.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pronounced Carr, but it's Kerr. But it's probably because they're Southern.
I
They
always tell
pronounce it
everybody
that.
think of the mason jar, right?
Right,
Kerr
right.
inside the mason jar. Yeah.
So Julene is one of my great friends. Used to be a client. She's graduated to my equal, my peer now. She's yeah, just fabulous. I can't wait for you guys to get to know her. Anybody that follows my YouTube channel has probably seen her. We've done collaborations before for she's an astrologer and she reads astrology very uniquely, and I believe she channels. I believe that you're a channel just like I channel tarot. Your medium is the stars and planets, but I still believe you're an oracle and that you channel the energies through your own um, past lives. And I told her from the beginning when she told me that she had an interest in this, she learned so quickly. I said, you're not learning anything, you're remembering, because
Yeah.
I think that, you've been practicing for this for lifetimes.
Yeah, it feels like that. A lot of things came very, very easy. And I should say too, my mother was an astrologer,
Oh,
the mother that raised me. And so I'm very familiar with a lot of the concepts, but throughout my life, I was busy doing other things. I paid attention to the astrology and dabbled in it a little bit, but I never really felt the need to dive into the intricacies of it until these recent years. And boy, when it hit me, it was like the bug hit me and it was off to the races. So I did feel like I was learning quickly. But I do think, a lot of astrologers, it's interesting in the astrology community, just like I'm sure it is in the, tarot or psychic community, because everybody has different feelings and thoughts on, the right way to do this and, what's real and what's not and all of this stuff. And so for me, a lot of astrologers will say you don't, astrology is not intuitive, right?
oh,
And I've heard that, right? And I think to myself, because me, right? I am a very logical person. I come from a very logical background, and so, when you hear something like that said, it's like, well, yeah, that kind of makes logical sense, especially when you're looking at something like astrology, which is, pretty much on the paper or in the cosmos the way that it is.
fixed. I hear fixed, like it's
Yeah,
not
it's fixed.
mutable.
Well, there's mutable energies, but yes, that it's there and you're reading it. And so, but it's funny because I notice when I'm learning something or when I'm reading something, um, the charts, the stars speak to me, at least, and I've heard this from other astrologers too, based on what it is that needs to come through for whoever exactly. And so, because there's a myriad of ways to read astrology, it's so broad, that to zero in on that one thing, how does that happen, right? It happens because there's something else behind that, some kind, in my opinion, some kind of energetic, nudge behind that, that's, you know, pushing that particular information at that particular time through. So, you know, when I'm looking at a chart, especially if it's my chart or it's something, you know, that I'm close to for sure, the astrology for me doesn't always come through like that, you know, like it's flowing. I've learned to realize that when I notice that there's a hiccup or it's cloudy or fuzzy, that I'm not supposed to be doing that, right? So that channeling that you're talking about, that intuition, is being guided by something bigger than me. And that's my opinion, because otherwise, why would the same planetary energies and components, you know, and all these things that I look at every day, sometimes not come through clearly. And sometimes it's just like boom.
Well,
boom.
and why would we need more than one? Right? It's like, so if the planets were just fixed and there was no, I mean, like the tarot, okay, you get a tarot book out and every card has, you know, a handful of meanings, right? And interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
But how they show up playing with each other changes that meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you froze up, Trace. You froze up. Are you there? Ah, there you are.
I'm here.
You froze up. Should I just ignore that? If you freeze up, should I just ignore that and know that you're gonna pop back on?
Yeah, it usually comes back. I've had trouble with every platform I've tried.
Okay.
Every one of them. They either glitch or they freeze up or they make that gut noise and it's just crazy.
Well, I won't panic.
One of these, hopefully yours once you get it.
Yeah, I'm hoping to.
You're here. But hopefully, I'll tell you why we're glitching.
Why?
I'll tell you why. Jesse, are you on your game?
Uh-oh.
Don't play your game until I'm done with my podcast. I need the bandwidth, okay?
He's like, what am I going to do? Oh, my God.
Right. He's got a whole hour to twiddle his thumbs in there. Read a book.
There you go.
Do your homework.
Oh.
Anyhow, what was I saying? Oh, with tarot, you know, you can memorize every single card, but if you're only drawing one card, that's fine. But when you are doing a spread, you know, when you clarify a card with another card, now it's changed the entire meaning. And every reader will read that spread differently. Mm-hmm. And most readers, not all of them, I'll tell you, I can tell the difference between a tarot reader that reads tarot. That's it. They don't use their intuition. They don't lean into the intuitive realm. They don't, you know, go up into the etheric. It's just, this is what the card means. This is the way I'm going to read it. I feel like they miss a huge aspect of the reading that way, but that's, you know, not mine to judge. However, when I read tarot, I'm like you, it speaks to me. The pictures, the colors, the energy of the person that's sitting in front of me.
Yes.
And so you know, I can see things in the person that I don't see in the cards, but I can see in the cards where that missing link connects. And so I absolutely knew the moment you started doing astrology, I knew that this was something that you have a calling for, and you are a channel, you're an oracle, and you use the planets and stars as your tool, where other readers or other astrologers, you know, are more fixed in their readings where, well, I know through my studies, this is what that means, and that's the way I'm going to present it. Well, I love the fact that you're a Gemini, and you verbalize something in a way that I've always believed and felt, but I never really put it in those words. When you say this and that are both true, I've always known that. Even as a small child, I was like, we create our reality through our beliefs. So whether you're right or wrong, guess what? In your mind, you're right.
Yeah.
Even if you think you're wrong, you're right about that too.
Yes. Yeah.
So this and that are absolutely true depending on the perspective of the beholder.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, and yes, exactly. And that's the way it is with everything, not just divination, right? It's people, connecting people together with, in different ways. And so, yeah, this and that is true. It's always good to at least be able to sit back and contemplate the possibilities, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, that's kind of, you're right. That's what I do with astrology. And sometimes it just comes through and I blurt it out. But, astrology is a divination. It's a divination of the stars. And
Right.
it makes sense to me. And for me, it's become a spiritual practice. It's something that I have learned to understand, that it's something bigger. The cosmos, the universe, it's bigger than just my little part of the world or just what I see going on. And so as a spiritual practice, it sort of connects me to those possibilities and the fact that there is something bigger working with all of us energetically. And, for me, it's astrology, but it's different for everybody. And for me, that was a really big deal because based on my history and my story, I didn't really ever understand spirituality or religion. I didn't grow up with it. And so, I always kind of fell back on logic. And, if I couldn't see it, I didn't really quite know if it was real. Although I didn't discount it, I didn't rely on it. Right. So,
Right.
yeah. And so I came to a point in my life where, things just began to happen in my material world that started to slowly show me that there was something more than just what I had personally relied on. And it came at a time when I needed it, and as I would find out years, that were coming, where it would change my entire life. Not astrology, just all of the intricacies that came in. And I used astrology as a spiritual practice to sort of gain understanding into my world, what was happening with me. And we all do that in different ways. So, yeah.
Well, we are going through what they call the Great Awakening, and it is the Age of Aquarius. We just left, I believe we've left the Age of Pisces, right?
Well,
and
yes.
So
lots of ages. I mean, that's like
Pisces,
long time. But yes.
Well, Pisces, yeah, went on for what, 2,800 years or something?
Yeah, exactly. It's like very long time. Yes.
Right. And now we're entering into Aquarius, which, by the way, they're archetypes, right?
Yes, they are absolutely archetypes.
Yeah. Planet is an archetype, which I believe represents the different personalities and faces of God. Everything I believe now, people don't have to believe the way I believe, but I believe that everything is God experiencing itself, and God experiences itself through the archetypes. And so everything is a face or facet of the divine. And I believe that when we move through an age into a new age, which, by the way, we're leaving the age of iron and entering into the age of ether, that's why it's so profound that you could be clear across the United States and I'm here and we're connecting as if we're sitting in the living room together or the kitchen together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's an ether net. That's the network. That's and I believe that, the powers that be, which I don't want to get into, conspiracy theories and all the dark, stuff. But there has been a ruling class of people and entities, humans and entities, that have ancient hidden knowledge that was squirreled away, hidden from the collective, and basically used to program us to become the lamb, right? The lamb, the sacrificial lambs. And so I believe that this age is all about whatever was hidden is now becoming known. And the reason why it becomes known is because, you know, I might have a small piece of a puzzle that you don't have, but you and I connect and now you have it, and you have a small piece that I have. And so we're going from separation into unification, because now, you know, where I was all alone in my beliefs and my experiences, now I can see the world, taste the world, smell the world, touch the world through other people's experiences in a way I never could before.
Yeah, and that's very Aquarian, right? That is Aquarius, right? Connecting people that we can't see, right? I mean, it's bringing people together. It's technology and all of those things. So that's a very Aquarius mindset, is building community beyond what you can see and touch right in front of you, you know, like with your neighbor.
Right.
Or
like Zoom meetings from people all around the world. I mean, as a YouTuber, I have clients and viewers from anywhere on the globe, literally. I mean, I have people that are out and ordered readings for me that are over in Africa, they're in Switzerland, they're in the UK, they're in, you know, all over the place. And I'm always amazed. I'm like, really? You know, like I've had people order readings from me that are over in India. And it amazes me. I'm like, I'm just some, you know, who am I? I'm just some little, you know, person over here.
That's the thing. It gives everybody, regardless of their standing in whatever society has set those, you know, tiers or standards for, it levels that out. It gives us all equal access and opportunity. And I think that's, you know, the way that it always should have been. I mean, you know, you talked about the archetypes, right, and the planets. I mean, these stories, mythology, and, you know, coming from, you know, Egypt and the Romans, and, you know, the South America, you know,
Nordics,
all these
things.
Right. If you listen to all of these mythological stories from these different civilizations, the theme is really the same, right? It's just a different way for their culture to express it and absorb it. But the end game and the overall story is still the same. So these archetypes can be described in mythology and stories and history in many different ways, but, you know, the archetype is still alive in each of those stories. And so there is a sense of, you know, that we're all at the same point, but we might get there in our understanding in different ways. And so that's more of what we're able to understand, that more in one another more, because we can actually connect and discuss those things. So it doesn't have to always be that, you know, people that are high profile that traditionally have had the voice, right?
Right.
You know,
and the narrative.
And the narrative, exactly. Now we all have a stage if we just want to grab that stage. And listen, you know, nobody has to listen, you know, to us. You know, we don't have to have everybody buy into one person or one thing or us. It's like, choose your path. You know, there's something there for everybody. And I like that that equality.
And the law of attraction states that we will attract other people that see the world through the same view that we do, or if there's a lesson in it, we will attract people to show us a broader spectrum.
Yeah. And I believe that. I think a lot of, well, we see it happening. It's happening all over. I mean, look how I met you. There are so many of us, and you've met so many other people, so have I, that have enriched my life and given me knowledge that I wouldn't have otherwise had. And it didn't matter who went to school where, or who, you know, who's living on this side of town. None of that matters. And that's what I like, is we can come together, and it's just feeling and thought and, you know, what's in your soul and your mind, and it's just like coming together. And there's so many possibilities when things like that happen. And I see that's progress in a different way than I think what we've been traditionally sort of programmed to consider is positive progress, right? It's just all about, you know, the white picket fence and the house and the CEO job or the education. It's like none of that's becoming less important. I guess what I should say is how things look are becoming less important. It's what you have to contribute, and we're all being given the opportunity to do that. And so I really, really like that. And honestly, it's that mindset for me that I've always kind of had, right? That sort of led me to make huge changes in my life, you know, over these last years. And
so speaking of which, let's briefly describe to people, introduce us to the old Julene,
okay,
and then do an improved version so we can see, you know, a little bit of your awakening and what brought you to where you're at. And then I'm going to pick your brain on the local or on the current astrology and what can we find out through what's happening right now.
Okay. All right. Well, you know, I way back, you know, just my initial story is, you know, I was adopted, and so I didn't ever know my biological family. And then I lost my adopted parents and started my life very young on my own. And, you know, really, and I had kids young, so I really wanted to build stability in my life. And so, you know, I went to school, and, you know, I wanted to make sure that I had secure home and all these different things. And so, you know, I landed in a career and a job that I was in for almost 30 years in healthcare. You know, I was in healthcare finance and administration for a very long time in hospital institutions as well as private. And then for the last 20 years, private consulting, so management in healthcare. And so very, very much working with institutions and the processes within the healthcare system. And it was very rewarding for me. And like I said, I'm going back to like my Aquarian sort of like things are equal has always been with me, because I very quickly in my career left large organizations and went into helping individual healthcare providers. Because I could see that there were imbalances and injustices. And so I spent my entire career working with people, organizationally, dynamics within organizations and process and operations and structure. But most of all, what I did was I was able to, I always recognized the value in every little piece, whether it was within an organization operationally or even in my life, and that there was never a hierarchy. It's like all pieces equally come together to be successful, to create a positive outcome.
Right.
And so I always sort of looked at myself as a fuser, like being able to fuse worlds and fuse things to help people understand the value of one another and, you know, get into these win-win situations. And so I was able to do that job that way because my vision of a group was that everybody needed to be plugged in where they were most valuable and to listen to people and then put that together. And very, very rewarding career, as well as, you know, in my life, it provided a lot of stability financially and otherwise for a lot of years. And then things started to change for me in my personal life, right? Things started to happen that, you know, would hit me in a much more emotional way, I think, than in the past, or at least I started to notice it. And so I started to look for something more. You know, something more and this was starting with my personal issues, relationships that would come up, and trying to figure out the kind of weirdnesses and the intricacies of the synchronicities and strange things that were happening to me. And so I started to look, and I reach out and connect with people like you, and study and try to learn and figure out, what's going on, because I started to realize, boy, there's a lot more going on here. I could feel it. It was changing my insides kind of in a way.
Well, and the signs and synchronicities.
Yeah.
For me, it was like when you bust out of the matrix, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz. You peel back that curtain and you see that everything you put all your faith and trust and belief in has really just been a few people manipulating things in a way that you couldn't see. And I try not to bring the conspiracy stuff out in me, but I as a psychic, I see the writing on the wall with a lot of things that have been spoon-fed to us as truth that is not. And so for me, I've known you since,
Long time.
almost not quite your beginning, but I mean toward the more beginning of your journey. And it was amazing for me to see that I was not the only person that was seeing things that I never could see before. And not only seeing it like a discovery of my own, but it was almost like something bigger than me was presenting it to me. Yeah. And not in a way to make me choose one or the other, but in a way to give me, like you said, a level playing field where at some point I got to be the one to create my own life through choice that I didn't know I had. Options that I didn't know I had. Yeah. Realizations that came to me in very, very paranormal ways. And so, although I've always believed in God, I was raised Christian and raised very devoutly. It never sat with me in a right way. I was always like, no, there's something missing. There's a missing component here. This doesn't feel like God. This feels like ego. This feels like humans, right? I know what humans feel like. And I know what God feels like. And when I sit in church, it doesn't feel the same. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, something's just off all of a sudden. And that's what happened to me. Yes, things started happening. It's like, for me, things got so loud that I couldn't ignore them.
Right.
And I knew at some point I knew I wasn't crazy. I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy because this, I have to fall back on, I'm not just going to wake up one morning or one day and have lost my, marbles, right? But it had to get my attention. But my personality is such that, well, if something doesn't make sense logically, I have to go digging, right? I have to go dig.
That's the Virgo in me.
And I have a Virgo stellium and Gemini. I have to figure out a way to connect the dots. It's like, okay, now I'm recognizing this, whatever this is, and now I have to understand it. And so I think that is, for me, what started it. It's like I started to search and look, and then I stumbled across the things that worked for me. But it went from personal, and then, after that was my personal life that started to open that up, and that started opening up my heart to a lot of things that were different than what I had focused on for so many years. And then it started to seep into the way that I was looking at how I was doing my job. And there was some point in time where I started to look around and I realized that although I had felt passion and felt like I was doing good work and bringing people together and making things successful, that at some point I realized that it wasn't
playing on the wrong team.
Well, but yeah, it was very upsetting to me because I always felt I did things for the right reasons, but I realized that what I was doing wasn't being used for the right reasons. Or somewhere along the line, I began to lose a passion for it very quickly. I started to see greed and, things falling apart. And, I'll tell you what, when the pandemic came along, it was like, oh yeah, I'm out. Like, you got to see, like, people could no longer contain, like, if there was an underlying motive for something before, it was like the emotion and the environment at that time, or panic, or wherever any person's individual fear was coming from, they could no longer contain it. And to me, it was very obvious. And it was like just bankrupt. It's just my passion for what I was doing became bankrupt, literally almost, it felt like overnight. And I left my career. I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm like, I am done. And I had been studying, astrology for a long time. And like I said, I grew up with it. And I was like,
which, by the way, can I intercede just for a second? Because a lot of people, not that it matters, because money is just energy. But I've noticed with a lot of people that have experienced this awakening, they went from making like 6 figures a year or more down to, leveling, like you said, leveling the playing field down to almost, blue collar income, but with a renewed vigor and passion. The money didn't matter anymore. What mattered was communion. What mattered was community. What mattered was what was right versus what.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
For me,
I mean,
though,
how hard?
I grew up very humble means, under middle class, close to poverty, and of course being adopted, it was like status and who people were never mattered to me. So even though I was able to create a career for myself where I did do really well, it was never for those reasons. It's just I followed the passion. But once the passion was gone and my heart wasn't in it, or I didn't feel like it was a heartfelt environment, it was sort of, being manipulated and, used. It was like that was it for me, and it didn't matter to me.
Right.
The money didn't matter to me. The cars didn't matter to me. It was like it just didn't matter. It's like I just could not do that anymore. And a lot of people thought I would lost my mind. People in my my world, like,
I know. Me too.
Maybe I have. I don't know, but
So so you had this great awakening. You quit your career, and so tell me about that time just a little bit. How did you was it a hard struggle? Did you deplete your savings? Because I know you moved. I know that you kind of rebuilt yourself from the ground up. You're still doing that. You're still not, where you could be, but you're happier and you are contributing to the collective in a way that is in righteousness with your soul. I mean, the Bible, there was a Bible verse that, always stuck in my head, and a lot of them didn't. A lot of them, kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But one that always stuck in my head is, all is right with my soul.
Yeah.
And I thought, how much peace did I feel when I heard that phrase, all is right within my soul. And that's righteousness. Righteousness is, it feels right, it looks right, it smells right, it tastes right. It is in alignment with who I authentically am. Whether it's right or wrong, doesn't matter. What matters is whether or not it's right for me.
Exactly. And I mean, a lot of that changed, but I knew, when I decided to upend everything, I knew the price that I might need to pay in my material world. I was very well aware of it, and I didn't have to do it, but I did have to do it, if that makes sense. And so, there were sacrifices, but I don't regret one of the things that I had to give up to move into a different direction. And I don't even regret it, that it's slow going, or that I'm trying to build this, or go back to square one, or learning more, like with astrology, it's like, I've learned a lot, and I do readings, and that. And, but when you do astrology and you're an astrologer, you're also a forever student, right? I mean, you're constantly learning too. So, but I don't regret, and I actually kind of like, having something that's always going to bring newness to my awareness. Yeah. So, that I'm not sorry for changing my life in the way that I did. I'm not sorry that I had to give up those things. I remember somebody said to me that I'd worked with for a long time, when I was ready to just start cutting off the really big pieces of my career. And didn't want me to, right? Trying to convince me. And I just once I get something stuck in my mind, again, if it's not in my heart, I'm done. And I was just like, no, I really, this is what I need to do. And this person said to me, well, um, uh, my parents always used to say, you can do whatever you want, as long as you have enough bucket money, right? Can I say that on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember that feeling. And I just calmly said, listen, I wasn't raised with nannies and servants, and that doesn't scare me. As long as I'm not 5 years old, a little girl scared, stuck in a place that I can't get out of, which, that's the way my childhood was, I'm okay. Like, I can make it through anything. And so, but what else has been
Everything always works out for me.
well, it doesn't always, but what's been nice these last years is that I've had people to reach out to that didn't care about the trials and tribulations that I was going through, and it was just there for me, just for me. It's like fancy cars and houses and things like didn't really matter to any of those people, and you're one of those people, and I appreciate that because I don't care about any of that either. Although I think a lot of people that thought they knew me for years thought that's the representation. Yeah, but no, it's just that was never, ever.
Right.
I only feel successful and I only get results in my life when I'm doing something that is actually worthwhile or following a passion. And it's almost like I don't have control over that, to be honest with you. Because anytime I've ever been in a situation in my life where it wasn't authentic, something was pulled right out from underneath me to put me in a different direction. And that I can tell you is 100%
Well,
true.
and that's happening right now. I'm noticing that so, I resonate with being a divine feminine. And, if you're in the community, you know all about the woes of the divine masculine, and but what I'm noticing is that the longer we cling to something that is not for us, the faster it disintegrates. And that's with intention and purpose, and it's a painful process. There are those that embrace that, and there are those that resist that, right? Well, when you look at archetypes and energy, not gender or body, the masculine archetype, the masculine energy is that which, actively makes things happen, creates things and makes things happen. But the feminine aspect of the creation process is allowing, and it's nurturing, and it's we can be in distortion either way, because we have both within us. And I was in that distortion of the feminine. Oh, fuck it, everything that happens, I have no control over it. It's just, I was in victim mode, and I was like, well, good things happen, or bad things happen to good people, right? And that was distorted feminine. And then, there are people who have been through things in their life where they get stuck in the distorted masculine, where it's, I can do this no matter what. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to get it done. And ain't nobody going to stand in my way, because, I'm like a dog with a bone. This is what I want, and this is what I'll go after, and this is what I'll get. And, it brings us back to that little meme that says, people who say it can't be done need to get out of the way of the people doing it. Yeah. Right. So masculine is doing, and it can be in distortion or it can be in balance. Feminine is knowing when to act. Well, actually being in balance is knowing when to act and when to just allow. And so I've noticed with all my clients, they're either in one distortion or the other. And now so those who resonate with like twin flame stuff, which a lot of people don't believe in or don't title it, whatever, it doesn't matter. People who are having these catalyst experiences where they're in relationship with somebody that they just want to push off a cliff one day and rush down and save them the next, and can't disconnect. It's like the energy stays, whether you want to disconnect or not. It's like they're there, right there. They're the mirror. It's like every time you look in the mirror, there they are. And so for me personally, I've watched so many people balancing internally what was out of balance externally, whether it was the masculine archetype or the feminine. And how that happens is, if we're in distorted masculine, which we can always be either or at any time, whether we resonate with being a divine feminine or not, we cling to things that we built, things that we desired, things that we wanted, that we went after and created, and we cling to them because we don't want to lose them, even when we start recognizing that it really wasn't what we wanted or needed to begin with. We were doing that because it looked right on paper, or it gave us a status, or it made us feel good about ourselves. And when the ego has that ego death, we start seeing the truth, which is the mirror, which, by the way, usually comes in the form of a matrix mirror, a counterpart, the yin, the yang. And so it just amazes me, because I've watched divine feminines in distorted masculine energy, and I've watched divine masculines in distorted feminine energies. And right now, with the eclipse season, to bring the astrology in, we've got another eclipse coming up, and we've been in the window of the beginning of it and coming up to the end of it. Things that are not meant to be clung to are being ripped out of people's hands. It's like you can only cling to it for so long before it starts rotting, decaying, and stinking. And eventually the universe steps in and says, listen, we gave you X amount of time to realize that this is not authentically who you are or where you need to be, which you may have had lifetimes of learning that lesson over and over and over again. But we are in the moment now, the souls that are incarnated, where we are walking through the Akashic records, and we're looking at, okay, this is the way it's always been done for maybe generations, right? But
exactly, it's tradition, it's breaking tradition. And so you could talk about the Age of Aquarius, it's doing things differently. And if you want to talk about relationships and the Aquarian vision, it is outside the box. It is not, why do relationships have to be traditional to be respected or to be valued, right? What is the institution of marriage, right? And you've got if we're talking the astrology, we've got all of these outer evolutionary planets moving through these degrees that talk about these things, and we see that things are breaking down, and it's causing that distortion or that rethinking. And when you talk about people coming together and soulmates, divine counterparts, relationships that are bringing these things to the forefront for a lot of people,
shaking things up.
Well, you think about it, shaking things up, but you think about it like, the power of love is not just a song. It's like, you want to get a lot of people's attention. It's like, create a connection like that, whether you're a person that lives in the logical world or or has that ethereal connection or not. It'll pull things out of you and put you in a place where you are forced to look at yourself. It's like, love is very powerful, even in the in the midst of the painful parts of that. And maybe there is more catharsis in that, that catapults you, like you were talking before. I don't know if this maybe was even before we started, that is a catalyst to move you into something else. Listen, I've always said 2 halves don't make a whole, right? And I still believe that. And then, with relationships and how things are changing, it's the same thing. It is going back. It's an Aquarian vision of bringing different things to our reality, right? We can do things differently. And, it's interesting even looking at the astrology of people that come to me for relationships. You can see where those breakdowns are, and based on any person's individual path. Listen, we run across people who are really stuck in the material, right? And that's because of maybe wounding, their childhood wounding of like feeling like they didn't have enough, or maybe they didn't, and lack of, and that can be drilled down to actual money and resources, and that's important, or insecurity creating the drive for status. They come by it. We all come by those things, honestly, right? But like you said, there's a balancing out of that that's necessary. And so you butt up against, I believe, lots of different people that help lead you there. But sometimes it's something so significant that really stops you in your tracks and makes you take a good look at your whole life and the
Why?
perimeter of that.
Why? I keep seeing the why. And my
The
mantra through the whole journey was, show me the truth no matter what the cost. Show me the truth no matter what the cost. And it was painful because some of the truth I didn't want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing what you see. So there is power in all of that, and we can see it, you know, changing people one day at a time. And it's not always pretty. It can be a lot of ugly. And I know that you really enjoy helping people through those. You do, and I love it. I love being able to, you know, help people explain to them, you know, what's going on or what they might need to work with, you know, from the astrological
Well, because
point.
we're leaders. There are certain souls, I believe, that incarnated to go through the painful breakdown themselves, and then they rebuild. You know, it's like the tower comes down because it wasn't on a good foundation. And we're going through the Akash, and we're taking a look now at the way it was always done, and where are the flaws, where are the cracks in the foundation? Is it can it be repaired, or does it need to come down?
Yes.
And then we bring down what needs to come down. We repair what needs to be repaired. And then we rebuild it in a much a more modern, updated way, remodeled.
Yep.
And, you know, literally, you think of modeling, remodeled.
Yeah, or you can look at an old classic car, you know, that you restore and remodel and create something new and out of something that was classic and traditional.
Alchemy.
Yeah, you know, it's fusing, again, going back to fusing pieces together to create something that's more functional.
Well, and because we're leaving the Iron Age and moving into the Age of Ether, what's happening is the old souls, the ones with these soul contracts, are incarnated in physical bodies here on Earth, because the Earth was going to ascend with or without humans, right? It's like, how many times in the past has she hit an event horizon and shook humans off like fleas? You know, it's like, okay, well, here's a natural disaster. We'll just get rid of them and we'll start again. It is alchemy. It is, you know, that doesn't work, comes down and then gets rebuilt, remodeled, reformed. And the Earth is a soul and has a soul and has an ascension journey the same as we do. And so what doesn't work for her, or it, you know, I call it her, you know, Gaia, but whatever doesn't work for her also must be brought down to 0 point energy and then rebuilt, remodeled for the better. And so there are certain, I believe, and like my beliefs don't matter, what matters is what other people believe, but what I believe is that we're going through a recalibration where the Earth, you know, is the mother. She wants to take her children with her, but they really need to let go of the old standard beliefs that have been killing her, and really deplete.
And the Earth has spoken. The Earth
right.
speaks loud. You know, when there's a crack in the the Earth, you know, it lets us know that it's not happy. You know, we can see that even in the environment in terms of climate. You know, in terms of our energy and resources and things like that. We've seen a lot of volatility there. So it's a prompt for us to change how we are using those things that we need to sustain ourselves, as well as how we're, I don't want to use the word using, but how we're interacting with one another and working together to make those things happen in a much more you know, responsible,
less consuming,
responsible way. Right. Responsible to one another, accountability to one another, as well as where we are. And there's been so much splitting of that, you know, for so long, that now's the time. So yeah, these things are, I think change is happening because all of us individually are experiencing life-shattering things, whether we choose to do it. It's like completely turning our lives around, or things come in and turn our lives around emotionally and materially, and we have to find a different way to do things. And so it's none of that's by accident, right? You talk about the age of ether and the end of things. And it's funny, you know, Neptune, astrologically, Neptune's been moving through Pisces. Pisces is the last, first of all, Pisces is ether,
Right.
right? It's the ethereal, it's the collective unconscious. It's just everything, you know, molding out there as a melting pot that we can't see. But Neptune, you know, the slowest planet in the universe, is moving through Pisces. It's to its last degrees of Pisces. And what comes after that? Aries, brand new, right? So we are moving
Look out
to a spring, to a spring in the collective in some way. So, you know, we're experiencing all of these shakeups, and it is because something new needs to emerge. And I think there are a lot of us that are catching on to that. One thing that's interesting is, like, I don't think that everybody is quite there yet where they appreciate how each person might be doing that differently. And being a part of the spiritual community, and I've had this conversation with you, but coming from a very, my past is very logical and, you know, like business oriented. It's like there is a place for both, but, you know, it's a fusion again, of fusing those things together. We're going to need all of these parts equally measured and contributing to do that. And I still think there's work to do there, because I still see a lot of division.
The way Spirit shows it to me is like, okay, you know, when you talk about first density, second density, third density, you know, 1D, 2D, 3D, we're talking sacred geometry, right? Which is, it's space and time, and which only exist in the finite, right? In the infinite, time is not real.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is we are evolving into a lighter density. Okay. So third density is heavy. It's karmic. It's earth school, right? It's about being the student and learning how to, you know, separate from love and then return back to love. So, you know, we're not really ascending back to the non-physical, back to source. We're still going to have a physical experience, but the way that my guides model it to me is that Vesica Pisces, where the accommodating both densities at this time. You know, we've got those that are still asleep in the matrix and in the heavy karmic lessons of the third density, where there's going to be war, there's going to be pestilence, there's going to be all kinds of bad things that happen. And, you know, we're all experiencing that, but the people that are ascending into 5D aren't affected by it because it's perception. So, you know, we're learning to shut our TVs off, shut the news off.
Yeah.
We're not focusing our attention on it, thereby we are not creating it. It goes back to that wave theory, you know, where if there's nobody viewing it, if there's not an observer, it's chaos. It doesn't become reality until there's an observer. So what they're observing, they're having pain with because they have emotional attachment to it. And we have already had that ego death around that and let go of our emotional attachment to that, like your old career, the old you, the you know, adoption story, and you're creating a new story, and you're using your spirituality to look at something that has an ugly end and a pretty end, and instead of focusing on the ugly end, saying this is all there is, it's all I'll ever experience, it's all I've got, the world's a shithole, things are never going to get better, governments are going to take over, you know, all of that lower density energy is still here, it's still happening. But there's also the higher density that is being created, that event horizon where the earth has hit. Energetically, she's ascending beyond that horizon. And then, you know, those who choose, it's not a different place. It's the same earth. It's the same. It's just a different experience based on your choices and perception on whether you want to view things as negative or positive. So if you're in the 5D, you see union consciousness. If you see somebody homeless under a bridge, instead of feeling guilt, shame, or responsibility, you think, oh my God, I understand that that person's soul chose that experience to evolve and grow, and it's not my responsibility to fix them. All I can do is teach and be the light, and they choose with their free will whether or not they're ready to give that experience up to create something better.
Right, but it is exactly those types of things. And yeah, you're right. It's like when you talk about 3D, 5D, we choose to separate ourselves from that which chooses to operate in a way that we've decided to walk away from. So we can choose that separation. And that's what we'll have to do. But I think that
yeah, see, I don't look at it as separation,
okay.
because I don't separate myself from that.
Well,
I just see it for what I see it. Well, I choose to not participate or create it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
But we're going into unity consciousness, not separation, where we've been in separation. Now we're coming back to union, where it's like there's no difference, there's no hierarchy, there's no difference between me living in a trailer in the middle of northwestern Pennsylvania and, you know, a governing figure that lives in a mansion, or somebody who lives under a bridge. We are all the same. The only difference between them and us is the way we choose to create our reality. And so, you know, I used to feel responsible. I mean, that's part of why I created my mission and created the soul contract, was because I felt responsible to save, like that savior complex, that Pisces, you know, let's hang ourselves from a cross and be responsible for the sins of everyone else. And now we're moving into Aquarius, where, you know, it's the water bearer. It's like, no, you know, we don't need other people to fill our cups, and we don't need to fill theirs, because the wellspring is within us. It always has been. We've had the ruby slippers from the moment we were incarnated. And so, you know, I look at people who are down on their luck, and I look at them with compassion and love. And, you know, I'm not better than or less than. That could be me. Just like the millionaire could also be me. I have the capability of creating that, right? Yeah. And if I have, then and if that's what I want, then it's time for me to start creating it, right? It's time to heal whatever blocks you have around that, so that that can become your reality. And so union consciousness is, for me, there is no separation. It's like you're the same as I am. You just got other soul lessons that you've chosen to experience in this lifetime. And I can be a good role model. I can be the light, right? I can be the light. I can shine the light. But whether or not you choose to sit in the shadow or sit in the light is not my responsibility. That's yours.
Correct. Everybody taking accountability for themselves. But I do think that it takes a level of opening up to, you know, inviting people to connect with one another. And I think that's more of what's happening now. And I think, you know, like you talked about, oh, well, you're a naturally compassionate person that wants to reach out and help. You realize that you are connected to other people. You felt those hardships yourself, like in your life. I understand, because I have too. So you recognize it and you want to help. I think what more of that needs to happen, but it needs to happen as in terms of bringing us together and being able to understand our collective experience. And some of us already do. There's a lot of people that don't. And I think it's funny because, like, situations present themselves that are horrific in our society, and we're like, well, why is this happening? For instance, take the drug epidemic, right? It's like, that is catastrophic for so many people. And there are people that have had drug and alcohol problems their entire life. I had it in my childhood affect me, and in my family, you know, as an adult. And so I have compassion for that, because I understand it, and I realize that I'm not exempt from that. But if you notice that what's happening is, like, this, unfortunately, problem with mental health and drugs is affecting so many people, even the people that thought they were above being affected by that, because they had the means or the wherewithal.
Well, because big pharma makes it acceptable. It's like, okay, well, you know, you don't have to buy it on the street, but I'll write you a script for it.
There's that, right? Or just access to healthcare, or just the ability to make your life look from the outside looking in, is if there's no problems and you aren't going to relate and reach out or show compassion to other people, when the reality is we're all not that different. From being in one world, like I was the girl in my career who came, others would have considered me coming from the other side of the tracks, right? I was in those networks. It's like those people, everybody that's there in that bubble of where everybody puts themselves in the status, the has and the have, their lives are truly, and they are definitely, as human beings, emotional makeup, physical makeup, no different. We're not all that different from one another. And things come along to break those things down and somehow bring us together so that we are feeling emotionally impressed. Like when something comes and pierces you right in the heart, you're going to feel it, right? Is that going to change you forever? I hope so.
It did me.
Me too.
Yeah, for the better.
And I think that's a lot. Yeah, me too. And I think that's a lot of what's going on. And I think there's going to be more of that. And you talk about the breakdown, right? So when I see that mean is like those things are happening to break down society so that it brings us to a more it's togetherness, but not
Union.
in a
I call it
cliche way.
Yeah, consciousness. Because even in the spiritual community, I can't stand when I click on a YouTube video or go to a church or go someplace where they talk about the chosen ones, right? You're the chosen one. And because I channel, I mean, I don't know who I'm channeling sometimes, it could be galactics, it could be angelics, it could be, but I know what love feels like. And so I only channel that which feels like it's the higher realms. But I hear very clearly, nobody is chosen. We are all chosen. We are all the chosen ones. The only difference between us and them is that we chose and they have yet to do it. Everybody gets the invitation.
Yeah. But I think
there is no hierarchy.
Yeah. And I think for, listen, I can't blame people for being stuck in those traditions. I mean, that has been ingrained in our society for so long. And there's fear in breaking out of that and doing something new. But it's those people that are willing to step outside. The more we have of that, the more come along. I mean, listen, the power is in where are the numbers, the power in numbers. And so that's the people, right? And so I just think that there's obviously a lot more evolution, and sometimes things get worse before it gets better. But I think that working on your own understanding, your own situations, one thing at a time, and however that comes into your life, whether it's through a relationship or through, unfortunately, a tragedy, or through an opportunity that somebody just falls into that gives them a stage or a place to, open up their mind and realize their gifts and different things. However that happens, it's just one piece at a time. And there's sometimes patience involved in doing that. And all you can do is grind, right? It's like, I think that's where that what you were saying, where you choose to do this, that's where that comes in. It's like, you do your part and then it spreads, hopefully. But waiting, sitting back and just trying to have a big picture view of how all that falls in line, I don't think that's, I don't think it's going to be quite that easy to sort of, you have to rely on.
Came easy for me. I had to go through the entire breakdown. I lost my religion. I lost my mom, my sister. I eventually lost most of my friends because I started believing things that they weren't in alignment with. And I started seeing where I was purposely allowing other people to victimize me because I wanted and needed to be validated or loved. And it was a roller coaster ride. It was like spirit put me on this ride and said, buckle up, Buttercup, because you don't get off until you get it right, you know? And I believe that not everybody goes through it that intensely. I believe a lot of us are souls that incarnated to go first. We're the leaders, right? Doesn't mean we're better than or stronger than, or it just simply means that we chose to do the hard work first so that we could be the example to those that come next, you know,
Yeah.
and then they can become the example to those that come after them. And eventually, maybe, you know, 2,500 years down the road, what we brought in and what we planted and what we changed might become obsolete, and there'll be a whole new round of leader souls that come in. Could even be us again, reincarnated 2,500 years later, where we come in and we're like, okay, well, here's the Akashic records. Here's the way it worked for 2,500 years, but the model is no longer, we've evolved beyond it. The model no longer works. So now it's time for us to break it down, pack it away. This stays, this goes, this is relevant, this isn't, this, you know, and then we archive it all. Energetically, we archive it because everything is relevant, right? All those experiences need to be in the Akashic record. They just don't have to be from where we're building from. And so, you know, there's always the history. We have to put the history where it belongs. But if you'll notice in society, when we switch ages or when we have a huge evolutionary change, there's always somebody or many somebodies that go out there and destroy history. They rewrite history. They get rid of the books. They burn. They have book burnings. They take down statues. They erase cave walls. They bury biblical text, and it's done. You know, there's always that negative and positive, but I mean, it's done. They believe they're doing it for nefarious purposes, but it actually serves the whole, because what it's doing is it's archiving things that we're rewriting history. But winner, see, in the ego, the winner gets to tell the story. And so what's happening is in this spiritual war, we're unearthing ancient knowledge and texts that have been not available to us, which kept us from evolving. And now we're getting it, and we're not just getting it, but we're sharing it. And it's creating an energetic shift where the evolution happens. And it's just, I mean, it's funny, even so. Another thing with unity consciousness is everything has a negative and a positive. Like, you know, the whole pandemic, it was designed, I believe, nefariously to thin the population, to meet certain people's egoic agendas in ruling the populace and controlling the masses. But look at how the universe transmuted and alchemized that energy and used it for the good. I know that during that shutdown, I didn't have a job to go to distract me. I, for the first time ever, had time, space, and nothing but time and space to reflect on who I am, why I am who I am. Am I happy with who I am? And am I ready to change, or do I prefer to stay who I am?
And I think a lot of people had that opportunity. I think a lot of people changed during that time, and it was a critical time for everybody. And there is a lot of positive that came out of that at the end of the day, I think.
Well, because everything is this and that. Remember, this and that.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, just like this, there's a negative aspect we can focus on, or there's a positive aspect we could focus on. For me personally, I hated it. I hated wearing masks. I preferred to stay home because I didn't want to. I felt like, you know, intuitively, it wasn't preventing anything. It wasn't saving anybody. It wasn't helping. Matter of fact, it was kind of hurting people that had asthma or breathing problems. And, you know, I mean, when you're recycling all of the germs, our mouths are some of the germiest places on our body. You would think that your Netherlands would be, but they've done proof that your mouth is dirtier than your butt. And so, you know, to put a mask on and to keep all of that in, you know, And then also the heart chakra connects with others within that 6-foot field. And so, you know, you got to stay 6 feet away from everybody is disconnecting us from one another through the heart, through the chakras and the aura, right? Yeah, because your heart is a transmitter.
I spent a lot of time observing because, you know, I agree with you. That was all these changes and strange things and a lot of controversy and people infighting and arguing over, you know, what we should be doing and what we shouldn't, you know, wear a mask, not wear a mask, get vaccinated, not good. And I just sort of chose to like step back and sort of observe all of that. And, you know, I had my own opinions, but I really was very careful about sharing any of that publicly. Because to me, it didn't matter. It's like, I'm kind of a live and let live person anyway. And it's like, do what is best for you. Just do no harm to others, you know? Right. But so for me, you know, and I was working at home for years and years, you know, most of my business was at home. My life didn't change that much either, but I did recognize that others.
The timer was just at 11:11, 1 hour, 10 minutes and 11 seconds when we started talking about that.
So anyway, I just sort of used it as an observation time to really see, you know, the human dynamic, the behavior. It was so interesting and incredible. And I just, you know, my choice was to stay out of the fray and just sort of pay attention to, you know, how that was affecting our society. And I think that a lot of people were affected, you know, negatively and some positively. It's just all about what you make certain things, right? Some things are just out of your hands. And, you know, it's a test of, you know, how you going to behave, right? I mean, I usually say with everything, it's like, here's what's, you know, everybody comes along these situations, you know, you can look at it however you want. Nobody has to agree with one another, but at the end of it, just don't be a dick, you know, like just like, don't be, sorry, excuse me.
Well, like, you know, I mean, there was an agenda behind it, but I like the way the universe or God or whatever you believe in, literally took a negative and turned it into a positive for those who were willing to allow it.
Yes, exactly. Totally agree. Totally agree. Yep. Crazy. Yeah. So lots. All right.
So ready. So let's talk just a little bit because we're already at an hour, 11 minutes and 44 seconds.
How does that happen?
I know. Really, I could talk to you. Well, and I do. You and I call each other and talk for hours. You know, it's funny because you're a couple hours behind me, and like I'll stay up till like 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes chatting with you, and I'm finally like, Julene, I got to go to bed, honey. And you're like, oh, that's right, I forgot. You're ahead of me.
I know. You're like, it's very late here. Yeah.
So let's talk about whatever you feel is important to talk about in the transits right now, on a personal scale, and on a collective scale.
Well, first of all, I want to mention coming up, like this is a really active time astrologically, one that has been anticipated for a long time. First of all, we have no planets retrograde after we've come out of the Capricorn retrograde shadow from January. All planets are moving forward from now until April, which is kind of a big deal. It's like, go ahead and move, especially after that long Mars retrograde that had everybody, at least, if not physically, mentally coming and going and, you know, feeling a little out of whack. But we do have some really big transits, planetary ingresses, some of the bigger planets coming up in March. We have Saturn moving into Pisces from its long stint in Aquarius, where it is at home in Aquarius. It is the traditional ruler of Aquarius, and that's a lot of that restructuring and, you know, sort of taking a look at what's going on in the collective, all the people, you know, the delays, the lockdown. Now we've got Saturn moving into Pisces for 2.5 years. And so this is kind of interesting because that's more of the ether thing. It's like, what is Saturn going to do in Pisces? I have my theories. I think that we're going to really be taking a harder look at the drug epidemic, the pharmaceuticals. I think healthcare is going to be really big. I think that water issues and water shortages are going to be a big thing, all things Pisces. And I think we're going to see a restructuring of those things, but maybe a breakdown first. So Saturn going into Pisces is really a big deal. Saturn goes first before Pluto, you know, so it kind of gets in there and says, here's where we need to tweak things. And then Pluto comes through and does everything stand the test of time? So Pluto is also ingressing. It's coming out of Capricorn. It's going into Aquarius, and Pluto is where it's like the slow burn, right? It's the long change that takes many, many years. Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for probably like 20 plus, about 20, 22 years. Pluto can go anywhere from like 12, 13 years to like 20, 22 years. So it had a pretty long stint in Capricorn since 2008. When we talk about Capricorn, it's financial institutions and, you know, government, it's our land, right? It's all of those structures, and we can see, you know, mortgage, all that stuff has been completely turned around. But in 2008, when Pluto went into Capricorn, that was when that housing bubble burst and we started to have problems and a recession. So when a large planet makes an ingress into a new sign, it usually comes in with a bang. That's where I'm getting at with this. So now that we've got Pluto going into Aquarius, which is the community and the collective, it's also politics. It can also be, you know, things like the internet, you know, and communication, like of, you know, sort of a higher realm, like ruled by Uranus and Saturn. It can be a lot of different things, but it's going to ingress into Aquarius here in the spring. Look for something in those areas of your life, as well as collectively, like a political shock, you know, more speaking up from people in the community and coming together. Uranus is the revolutionary, right? That's all in Aquarius. So Pluto's going to be working through and changing that. But when it goes in to Aquarius this spring, we could see it could really be noticeable. Usually Pluto shows up and it's like, boom, something really noticeable happens. It'll roll back into Capricorn for a few months before it fully goes into Aquarius next year, right around this time. But look for something. Those are two really big transits happening that are coming up. Now, personally, like for us, you know, we've got this week is kind of a nice week to look. We just had this full moon in Leo on Sunday. You know, Leo, all about, you know, showing our authentic self and what are we passionate about, what's in our heart. How can we showcase who we are? You know, I mean, the sun is the brightest light in the star, and the sun rules Leo, and it's all about shining your light and standing in your own power. Of course, a full moon is opposite the sun, so we've got that moon there, which is what you need, right? That's like your emotions and your feelings. But the moon is also your environment. So it can affect people in any of those ways. The sun being on the other side of Aquarius is all about how do we do that, but do that within the collective. Are we going to becoming like a wrecking ball, or are we going to consider one another? Are we going to be afraid of showing ourselves to other people because we might stand out and we don't have that level of confidence? That's all about the full moon. That full moon was squaring Uranus and Taurus, which is ruled by Venus. So that can be, and you know, we can't really predict Uranus because it's out there beyond Saturn, beyond what we can see, unless we have a telescope. But Uranus is transmitting energy, electrical sort of like zap energy, to break through things that need to move, whether they're stuck and they need to be moved forward, or they need to be blown up completely, and you know, something needs to be taken in a different direction. Whatever that is,
a divine tower moment.
Right, be a tower moment. And with Taurus, it's ruled by Venus, but it can be our bodies, right? It can be the earth, it can be our financial situations. With that full moon squaring Uranus, and overall a very positive moon, right? Because Leo is you know, optimistic and joyful and all of those good things. It's all about creation and intuition. It could be a good thing, but something, Uranus is bringing something of a surprise there. And it could be as subtle as an intuitive hit or a flash of insight, or it could be something as big as a material actual change in the body or in the environment, or because it's ruled by Venus, could also be love and sensuality, right? And you're actually creating a tangible, solid love, building that in our material world. So look for something like that. And even though that full moon's over, that square from the sun continues all week long to Uranus. So the square to the sun to Uranus is continuing beyond the full moon. So it's taking some of that energy with it throughout the week. We've had 2 years of squaring Uranus, right? Saturn square Uranus, all these squaring Uranus. Saturn's still pretty close to the sun, starting to separate. So that whole Saturn square Uranus is starting to leave us. But the Uranus degrees in Taurus are to all talk about, because, you know, the degrees have meaning, you know, and I won't get into what those are specifically, but those degrees of Uranus, first of all, they're degrees we've passed over before last year because of the retrogrades, and they're coming back up again. So the interesting thing I find about this Uranus square and what's going on with this full moon and this upcoming conjunction of the sun square Uranus to Saturn is it's bringing up, these are degrees of Taurus that are talking about old information, old knowledge, old situations that are coming back up. Are we going to handle them the same way? Is it something old that we need to restructure and look at differently? Is this a mindset? Is it a practical situation in our life? This is talking about something old. We were talking about that earlier. These degrees talk about old knowledge, old situations, things that we are familiar with, and what have we learned during these retrogrades as these issues have come up that add to or create a more progressive outlook or mindset or situation for us to move forward and do something different. So don't be surprised if something situation
as you're
comes
saying
back.
that, I'm hearing, you know, because I channel, as you're telling me this, I'm hearing boundaries are going to be a big thing, personal boundaries.
Well, could be. If you've learned if something old comes back or a situation presents itself, you know, and you learn something that tells you, or you're not in the same place, you're not able to deal with it the way that you are, then the boundaries come up. It's like, no, I'm going to do it this, and this is why. But a lot of this is about being able to express that calmly and practically, because we have other factors in there too that could, you know, send those things off to the races in, you know, a more of an aggressive way. So, you know, I think this is a lot of review here this week, things coming back in the Taurus area of your chart. If everybody wants to look, it all depends on where Taurus sits in your chart. But collectively, you know,
that's my north node.
Yeah, and your north node, and the node, that's the other thing, is, you know, all of the planets have moved through the north node too. So you know, this is where we are supposed to be going, right? Doing things differently, you know, in all of those areas of our life, because it's like, no, we need to be practical and simple and realistic about how we're doing things. So this is really prime. And what's interesting about this week after the full moon and this Uranus, these things coming up potentially from the past, is that we have Venus in Pisces, which is exalted in Pisces. It loves Pisces. We have Neptune, of course, it's been in Pisces, that is at home, and we have a connection there that has been made. So it kind of brings in a little bit of dreaminess or possibilities, or just sort of, you know, energy in terms of love and you know, creativity for sure. But it can also be, you know, is it real? Is what I'm seeing real? You know, it can feel really good. So that Venus Neptune conjunction that has passed through and the square to Uranus, and has passed through Saturn, is going to be kind of sitting there on Valentine's Day together and the day after, which is really kind of cool for everybody out there with the Valentine's Day things. It's going to be a beautiful Valentine's Day. Lots of opportunity for sweetness and dream and love, but also to be very careful and remember those boundaries, right? And just enjoy that time, but know that there's a practicality to come back to, and don't get lost in the dream kind of thing. So there's that that's happening.
So
then we have.
Can I ask you something before we move on to the next
Yeah.
thing? So just curiously, so the sun is about to return to Pisces.
Yes.
And you're saying that was it Uranus or Pluto? Which one's entering into Pisces?
Saturn.
Saturn. So when you get Saturn and the sun, both male aspects, you know, powerhouses, in the same place, the same, you know, what can we look for those that are born beneath that star?
Well, Saturn, first of all, and there's a lot of controversy about this, but Saturn is looked at as a feminine planet.
Oh, okay.
But
doesn't feel that way energetically to me, but
yeah, well, and in Pisces, you know, Pisces is a feminine sign, but you know, what does that mean for, well, if you've got Saturn in Pisces, like you do and I do, you're up for your Saturn return, right? But you know, Saturn, it comes in and it wants us to really buckle down and take a look at that area of our life. That's where we need to put some time and energy into creating a structure, or at least acting responsibly. And in Pisces, that goes back to a lot of what we were talking about earlier. It's like you're feeling into something, like, are you going to take your place in the collective conscious to do the right thing? For instance, it has can have a lot to do with spirituality and creativity. And in the mundane world, things that we talked about, like water and, you know, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, you know, there's such a broad range, but really, it's about tapping into that compassion for everybody, and maybe in a spiritual way, which I think we talked about. It's like spirituality comes in so many different forms, you know, just like they say God, you know, is everywhere. Spirituality is everywhere. It's like, it may not be lighting a candle and putting your crystals out in the full moon. It might just be saying hello to the person that's in the checkout counter that looks a little sad, or helping somebody, you know what I mean? Like, that's also spiritual. Like, so during that time when Saturn's in Pisces, it's like, how are we behaving within the collective? Are we feeling into the collective conscious and the emotions? So I think that what that means is that, you know, it could hit some people very, you know, emotionally. You know, Pisces isn't the most jovial sign either. It's where, you know, your journey that the whole time is coming together in like a soup, right? And you can feel a lot of things, and it can be confusing. You have to try and figure out where you land with all that stuff before you move on to a new beginning, right? Aries, the beginning of the zodiac. So it's, you know, that's kind of how Saturn will affect you. But for those of us that have Pisces placements, it will be more significant for us, you know, depending on what area of life, house, and what planet it's hitting. For me, I have Pisces at the top of my chart, so I fully expect it to be out there, right? It's gonna affect me, and people are probably going to see that somehow, either through me or about me. And you've got Pisces, I believe. I remember. Do you have Pisces in you have the top of your chart too, but it's not. Yeah, it's at the top part of your chart though. So, you know, that's something
so my Aries too, like it's right there at my
yes, yeah,
my midheaven or whatever.
Yeah, and so you know, it'll be a very, you know, kind of public type thing for you too. I think maybe it has something to do with you teaching or learning things. You know,
which is
thinking your chart's
really ironic.
Yeah.
Which is ironic that you say that, because, you know, I just did a channeled message for myself. It wasn't for the collective, it was for myself. And I was told that it's time for me to step into community and start doing local community.
Yeah.
Not, you know, because I've been working on the internet and reaching people all over the world, but Spirit's like, no, you were incarnated in this body, in this region on the map, because there's work here to be done. And then my friend Sherry opened her store, and now I'll be reading in her store, teaching classes and workshops in her store. And then out of the blue, I got an email from the local public library. And I don't know the woman. I don't know how she found me. But she emailed me and asked me if I would be interested in teaching a class on the like the history of the tarot and you know how it's becoming a more acceptable thing in society. And she's wanting to actually, you know, educate the community on metaphysics.
That's exactly where it's hitting in your chart. So that could be a theme for you. You know, Saturn is also the teacher. So that could be a theme that's how it shows up for you, as you're stepping into that role. And it'll be different for everybody because it's a mutable sign. Also, if people have mutable angles or they have points that match up as Saturn goes through Pisces, that hits their mutable planets, which is Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, there's an effect there. So that transit and ingress into Saturn can affect a lot of different people, not just Pisces, in a lot of different ways. You just explained how that will affect you. So it'll be interesting to see. I always love kind of taking a look at how things are shaking out for different people in their charts. But
well, and I've been put on the stage other ways too. Like I'm singing in 2 bands now, and I'm up on stage more than I've ever been. It's kind of profound. Like everything just kind of came in all at once. Plus the podcast, I was pushed by Spirit to start the podcast. And so, you know, I'm being front and center with the interview process. I don't know what's going to come from it because it's really not it's more mission based, you know, it's not part of making money or you
You're
know,
starting a lot of new things though. And a lot of that for you, which we didn't talk about, is Jupiter in Aries moving into your house of career and public image. And we just talked last week where Jupiter was sitting right at the very apex of your chart on that day. It's like things are going to off to the races, lots of new beginnings, lots of opening and vitality, a lot of it's cardinal energy. That's the area of your chart. So that's a lot of initiating and starting things. I think this is going to be a great next 3 months.
I'm a cardinal sign too.
You are a cardinal sign. So it does affect you personally. You have a Cancer rising. This is going to be a very positive time for you in the next 3 months. I really, really see that. I was telling you that, remember, the fall. I'm like, wait till after the first of the year, I think things are really going to be off to the races. And you just said like all these different things. So that's a lot of Jupiter. And yeah, anybody that's got Aries or cardinal placements, Jupiter is in Aries, it's going to zoom through Aries between now and May. And a lot of opening up and things getting very big there. Again, it doesn't always have to be positive. Have we done the work beforehand, right? But
the funny thing was that for me personally, when all this started coming in, and I took the responsibility, I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll commit to that. I'll do that. Then all of a sudden, I got laryngitis. And because, you talk about Capricorn rules the teeth, I had trouble with 3 teeth. And so, I signed up to do all of this stuff. And then it was like the universe came in and said, no, you have to slow it down. We have to slow it down because it was coming in too fast, too rapid. And because I was excited, I was accepting everything. And they're like, let's balance this out a little bit. Yeah. And so like I'm behind on my readings. I didn't get to do my zodiacs last month. I'm not sure. I'm going to do them this month, but they're not going to be on schedule. They're not going to be, done in the order that they're usually done.
And they understand that. I mean, a lot of people are going through changes. So I would hope this goes back to where we're talking about trying to understand each person's individual situations, and hopefully and having compassion for that. So I hope that people are, because Tracy works really, really hard. It's like we all have stuff happen like that, you know. She's
Mm-hmm.
had a
Oh, I couldn't have done anything if I wanted to. All I could do was talk like this. That was it. I couldn't record anything. I couldn't do anything.
and you would have only been able to do that for a little bit of time before.
Right.
Completely.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were having that with your angles, right? You were having those transits where Capricorn is, which is part of your 6th house of health, by the way, guys. So when she said she had a tooth problem, I was like, oh my gosh, it's, here we go. It's right there. But I'm so glad that that's getting better for you too. Tracy had a hard time with her teeth, and she's on the mend, thank goodness, because that's painful.
Yes.
But
And for over a month, like they couldn't even get me in. I called everywhere. I was about ready to go to the emergency room and just say yank them, like go for emergency care, because every place I called wouldn't get me. And they're like, oh, we're booked out till July. And I'm like, no, unacceptable.
I'm glad.
I can't wait.
So glad. So anyway, that's kind of the astrology. The last thing is we've got Mercury approaching Pluto conjunction, right? It perfects on the 10th, and it'll be through the weekend. It's already starting to feel it. So be careful about obsessive thoughts, first of all, because that can, Mercury's the mind. But look for uncovering something, and that could be uncovering something that comes through a dream, through just a message from somebody else, could be an actual conversation. But Pluto and Mercury together can be big, even like developments in terms of scandals, like messages, finding out something that's about something that's been hidden. And it could affect our collective, government, Capricorn, land and its government. So we'll see.
Well,
but
it's funny. I'd like to see government fall.
I know.
I'm also aware that, we haven't really built a foundation to replace it yet. I know personally, working with other light workers, that there are awakened beings in those institutions, in, the education, the government, and they've got fresh new thinking, fresh new models to introduce, but the collective isn't ready to embrace them yet. And so, part of me is like, I can't wait for it to all fall. And so that what's the saying? Necessity is the mother of all invention.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, I also realize that that is going to be painful for a lot of families, a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of trauma. There's going to be, people that struggle, and some that don't make it. And I know that. But I also know that our souls incarnate in certain situations because we signed up for that. It's an experience that our soul wants or needs to have. And, so, the unity consciousness is everything's always in perfect order, even when it seems like it's in chaos.
It's not, yeah.
But when people say things like you just said, that fear, a lot of people fall into that fear of, oh my God, what do you mean? What's going to happen? What are we going to, is it going to affect me? Is it going to be negative or positive? And I always want to reaffirm, everything's always exactly where it's supposed to be, doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. And whatever experience you have with it, you may not be able to choose the experience, but you can absolutely choose the way you choose to have that experience.
Yes, the reaction to it. Totally agree. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's great. I think, it'll be interesting to see what happens between now and Valentine's Day. If anybody has any interesting stories, any gossip or scandal or some kind of uncovered information, or has a really dreamy, beautiful Valentine's Day, or they have something come back from the past that is resurrecting itself, and they had the opportunity to present it or handle it differently, and hopefully it works out beautiful, or it feels better for you. I'd like to know. Wouldn't you, Tracy? I'd love to hear about
yes, absolutely. And we're gonna conclude this because we're moving through the time.
Oh my God.
Got other readings to do.
I know I had to step away because my computer, the battery was dead, and I was like, oh gosh, this isn't gonna look good, but I've got to go plug my computer in, or it's gonna
mine
die.
too. Mine's plugged in, but the plug is bad. You got to wiggle it and screw with it to get it to
Thank
charge.
you so much,
You're
Tracy.
welcome.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
going to list underneath this, and I need to tell you, you might already know this, but the last time we did this once before. It was
Yeah.
during Mercury retrograde.
Yes, it
Well,
was.
what happened was when I ended the podcast, we hung up before I hit stop recording. And then we lost the entire recording. So today, when we end the podcast, I'd like you to stay, don't hang up.
Okay.
Let me hit stop record.
I won't touch
and then I'll
anything.
say another time. Okay.
So
But I
thank
do
you
want to
for
tell everybody that
Huh?
I was just going to say, I want to tell everybody that you offer these services and she's so generous with her time. If you've ever gotten a 2-hour deep dive from me and you've spent 4 hours with me, you'll understand that me and Julene, um, we have a purpose, and that purpose isn't on a time frame. I'm not saying that she's going to donate 4 hours of her time. I'm just saying that you will always get exactly what you're meant to get from every session you book with either one of us, because neither one of us is good at leaving anybody hanging in a place that's not comfortable to be in, if there's anything we can do to help with that, right?
Yeah. My readings always run long, and it's okay. So, not all of them, but a lot of them do. It's just because I don't want to miss a detail, and that's just that's just who I am. So there's not generally, and yeah, and you too. So yes, I am available for readings. I can look at your birth chart, your transits, progressions, like what's going on right now in your life. Take a little peek into what might be up, and yes,
we got
can look
Valentine's Day coming
at
up, so everybody,
relationships.
you're in a connection, whether it's a twin flame connection or just a romantic connection or a marriage or whatever. What a great time it would be to look at your synastry chart.
It's
or
synastry, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I know that me and the guy I'm seeing right now, our synastry chart's pretty, like, very highly compatible. I mean, of course, you and I have talked about some of the shadow attributes that could present, but there's like a score.
But that's with everybody and everything.
And ours is like,
yeah, everybody, nothing is perfect. Half the battle is, more than half. It's like knowing yourself, the other person knowing themselves. Again, two halves don't make a whole, and just knowing where
right,
the strengths and weaknesses are and just how to work with it. Just
and being
astrology.
willing to work with it.
Yes. Yeah. Astrology doesn't, make things happen. But it does tell you what what is the overall energy that you can work
Potential.
with.
Like tarot,
Potential. Yeah, and potential.
tarot. A lot of
So
people will be like, well, you gave me a reading and you said this would happen and it didn't happen, but there was a potential to happen, and then I showed up differently. And I'm like, well, that's what tarot is all about. Is it shows you the trajectory of the energy, because energy has momentum, right?
Exactly.
And whatever you're creating in that energy, you're heading straight forward, because all timelines exist, all potentials exist, but the one that you're headed for is the one currently you're creating. And tarot will show that to you. It will also show you a way that you can show up differently,
Exactly,
in order to create a different outcome and put you on a different, higher path, right?
Everybody has free will, and energy is fluid, but just like with astrology, you can see here's what the karma and the fate is, but how that turns out, whether it's a higher expression or a lower expression, or it's is up to the person. So yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I have a website, and I do have YouTube, but I haven't been on there for a while, so I'm gonna reboot that here soon, hopefully. But
Well, we'll link everything underneath, and people go ahead and subscribe to her YouTube, because when she was up and running, see, you changed your whole life. You moved house, and you took responsibilities in your family dynamic that you didn't have before. And so, I always say shit happens, right? But that your desire is to land there and to reboot that as soon as you are able to. So if you're interested, if you really love Julene like I do, I just love her to death, and you would like to follow her, all of her links will be in the description box below. You can book a session with her, if you want to book a session. And, you know, if you don't know what you want or need, contact her, because in astrology, there's so many different charts and different ways you can look at, you know, let her know, you know, what you're struggling with, and she'll tell you which way to discern it in the best way, you know, for what.
And you know, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel would be awesome, because I am going to reboot it. But you can also find me at my website. It's Jovi's Star Astrology. And if you send a message through the contact section, it'll email me. But you can put my email if you want to, and the website, whatever you want.
Well, I'll just have you send me the links that you want so I can copy and paste them.
Oh, okay.
Quickest for me, I'll just copy and paste.
That's smart.
And that way, because Jovi Star is spelt in a way that most people wouldn't think to spell it. Just like Tracy is Tracie, but a lot of people spell it Y or I or EY. And so Jovi is Jove. And so, you know, you type it all out, send it to me as a link, not all in one paragraph, but like the links, and I will copy and paste them and put them beneath in the description box. And that way, anybody that wants to contact you can. If you're engaged, looking to get married, I know that when Rich Lop, most of the people that follow me also follow Rich or know of him, for their wedding, Julene and I put together an opportunity for them to look at their marriage and their life they were creating together. And that was our gift to them, you know? And so if you're engaged to get married, or you're moving, or you've got a big life circumstance and you want some guidance, you know, what better way to do it than to have somebody who actually channels energy, not just reads the planets. You know, it's the same with tarot. Like, there's lots of tarot readers. You're going to get the bare bones if they're just reading cards. But if they're reading energy, you'll know the difference. I've had so many people tell me, yeah, you're welcome. And so we're going to end this here. Do not hang up, because I love you. I'm going to give you a big hug off.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks for being here. You're welcome, honey. I love you so much. And we're going to have you back on again once you're up, and like once both of us, because like I said, my voice is still hoarse. I'm still, you know, nervous a little bit. But I have.
Oops.
What we'll do is once the dust settles, we will do another collaboration, and we'll put it on both your YouTube and mine and get things kicked back up again.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.